Hi, welcome to this video tutorial. In this lecture, we're going to talk about properties. First, let's discuss what JavaFX properties really are. So JavaFX properties store the inner state of a control and allows us to listen to state change from JavaFX UI controls. So this means that we will be able to perform an action if the value of the property changes. And JavaFX properties can be bound to one another. So this binding behavior allows properties to synchronize their values based on a change value from another property. There are two types of JavaFX property. We have read or writable. We also have the read-only property type. JavaFX properties hold actual values and provide chain support, invalidation support, and binding capabilities. So all the JavaFX property classes are located in the JavaFX.beans.property package. So if you want to work with JavaFX properties, remember to import this package, JavaFX.beans.property package. So we have here the most commonly used JavaFX properties. We have under the read and write, we have the simple boolean property. We also have simple integer property if you want to work with integers. We also have double property, and lastly we have simple string property. And of course, if you want to work with simple string or string property, you have to use this simple string property. And under the read-only properties, we have the read-only boolean wrapper. We also have the read-only integer wrapper. We also have the double wrapper, and the last is the read-only string wrapper. Let us see how to implement these properties, the read or write, and read-only properties. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our new project. So file, new, and other, select the JavaFX project and next. So JavaFX Properties and click on finish button. So we have here a basic application for our JavaFX properties, which contains two files, which are main.java and application.css. So let's create a new file for our property, which is under Java, and class, let's name our class as my number. Finish. Okay, so as you can probably remember, we need to import the properties from JavaFX beans.property. So let's type in import javafx.beans.property. So this is importing all the classes for our properties. So next, let's create a new variable. So private double my number. Okay, next, let's create the setters and getters for this particular variable. So right click, source, and generate getters and setters for our variable my number, and click on generate. So now we have the setter and getter for this my number variable, but in the case of double property, we need to change the type of this into double property. And as you can see, this is giving us the error of type mismatch because we defined our double property or my number variable as double property instead of type double. Okay, so we need to check first if the my number variable is not equal to null. So my number is not equal to null, so return my number dot get. Okay, and otherwise return 0. So in the case of this setter, we cannot set this directly. We're going to need the simple double property and use the set method of the double property. So let's create a new method, public double property, and for the name will be my number property, and close. Next we're going to check if my number is equal to none. So if it's none, then my number will be simple, new simple double property, and initialize the value into 0, else return my number. And this method here should be this, that my number property, and use the set method, and we just have to supply the my number as the parameter. Okay, save our file, and we're going to create another file which is controller. So Java, and then class will be, and for the name, let's name it as main controller.java. Okay, and this class should implement the initializable class. Initializable class implements initializable, and we need to import the initializable class. Of course, import JavaFX.fxml and initializable. Okay, and the next step is to implement the unimplemented methods. And we just have to create an instance of the myNumber class that we have defined earlier, which is myNumber, and number equals new myNumber. Okay, and then let's initialize this number into 0. The next step is to add the label. So private label, let us say value of number, and let's add the annotation of fxml. We just need to import this and also this label. Okay, so before we forget, let's make sure to make the number as final before we initialize the number as 0. Next, we need to set listener to this number property coming from this class. So earlier we defined the number property method, so we're calling that in our main controllers. So number property, and then add listener. So inside this we need to type in new change listener, and of course we need to pass in the object. Okay, and after we need to add the unimplemented methods. Okay, change, and inside this change method we need to set the value of our number to the label. So value of number dot set text, and of course our number, and this should be new double, and my number should get the my number, or use the get my number method, and we need to convert it to string. And we're going to define few methods here, or two methods here, for our button clicks. Okay, so private or public, to make sure that the fxml file could find our method. Public void btn click plus, and then action event with event as the variable name. Okay, so inside this method, let's call on the variable which is value of number, and set my what method, set my number. So set, this should be number, and then set my number. This should call the method number, set my number, then number get my number, and then we need to add 1. So basically we're just incrementing our number, and we need to import this import action event, and let's define another one, btn click minus, and action event just the same, but this time it should be subtraction. So the next step is to create the UI for our application. So new, and then other, and then under JavaFX, click on the new fxml document, click next, and this should be main fxml or main style or something. Okay, finish main style.fxml. So we need to define a button or two buttons and a label. So open up with scene builder, open our main.fxml file. First, we're gonna need to set the size of this anchor pane. So go to layout, and we need to set the preferred width to 600, and the preferred height is 400. So we need to add a label here. So label 1, and there should be 2 buttons. Okay, so this should be subtract, and this one should be add. So basically we're just adding 2 buttons and a label. So If we try to run our project later, once we click on this subtract method, the value of this label, which is coming from the myNumber property, so should change according to whatever buttons or whatever button we click on. So subtract, and then let's define few properties for this. So change the font size into something bigger, like 22, and then the color should be red. Okay, change the size into this, and we need to add the controller to this main style.fxml. So controller, and let's find the main controller here. Okay, save, and make sure that our subtract and add button should reflect or should reference to the methods. So this subtract button should reflect or reference to the minus method that we have defined in our controller class. So click bt and click minus, and this one should reference to click class method that we have defined in our controller class. Save your file and make sure to change this labels ID, which is under code, and the ID should be value of number. Save your file. Okay, go back to our Eclipse, and we need to add, instead of using the default root element, we need to set it to parent root equals fxml loader dot load, and get class that get resource, and of course main style.fxml. Okay, and we need to delete the border pane at the top, and we need to import the parent class. Okay, let's just remove this unused import. The size should be defined in our scene builder. Okay, root, and let us refresh our project. Refresh, and then run. Click on the run button. Okay, so we have here the subtract and add buttons. So let's try to click on this subtract. Okay, so every time we click on this subtract method, the value or the display value of this text label changes to something less than one of the original values. So if you try to click on the add, it should increment also. Subtract, add. So that's how to implement the properties in JavaFX. Thanks.